They didn't just spit on his hat. They stomped on it, laughed, and hung it on a plasma torch like some trophy. That was their first mistake. Their second was still breathing when he stood up. It was a dry, crackling afternoon in Rattler's Reach, the kind of place where dust never settled and the sun always looked angry. The saloon doors creaked the same way they had for 2 centuries, though now half the patrons had scales, tusks, or breathing tubes wired into their skulls. Jedediah Boone pushed them open with one hand and stepped in slow, boots heavy, his shadow stretched long behind him. He wore a duster that looked like it had been through 4 wars, and a wide, sun-bleached hat with a slug hole clean through the brim. The hat alone made every head in the room turn. Boone didn't flinch. He just walked to the bar, ordered water with something bitter in it, and sat down on the stool like gravity obeyed him a little differently. Nobody spoke to him, not yet. Even in a town like Rattler's Reach, where bounty posters covered the windows more than sunlight, a man like Boone drew a different kind of silence. That silence broke when Cracks stood up. Cracks was huge, at least 7 feet tall, with blue skin tight over thick muscle and eyes like oily marbles. He swaggered over, dragging his heavy belt of mismatched weapons, and looked down at Boone with a sneer you could smell. "Well now," Cracks said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Looks like some antique wandered in off the desert." Boone didn't turn. He took a sip, eyes forward, calm like the drink was the most interesting part of the room. Cracks leaned in. "You deaf, old man? I'm talking to you." Then, with exaggerated flair, he reached out, plucked Boone's hat from his head, turned to the room, and launched a gob of spit dead center onto it. Laughter erupted like someone had fired a starter pistol. But Boone still didn't move. Not his shoulders. Not his hands. Just his eyes, slowly turning toward the hat, now hanging limp and soiled off the corner of the plasma heater. That's when the bartender ducked. Boone stood with a slowness that made everyone hold their breath. He took 3 steps to the heater, plucked his hat off the edge, and examined the stain like it was a personal letter from the devil. The room waited. Boone raised the hat slowly, brushed off the worst of it, and lowered it back on his head like crowning a grave. "You should be done that," he said. The laughter hiccuped, uncertain now. Cracks, cocky, shoved Boone's shoulder. "What are you, some kind of preacher?" "No," Boone said. "But I do deliver men to God." The bartender exhaled sharply and dropped behind the bar again. Boone turned and started for the door. Everyone thought that was the end of it, just another old relic outmatched and outnumbered, tucking tail. But they hadn't seen the pistols yet. Not properly. And they didn't know whose name was burned into their barrels. Boone walked through the saloon doors, boots thudding slow on wood that groaned like it knew what was coming. The silence inside crackled with nerves and booze-fueled bravado. Cracks turned to the others. "Get him!" Half the bandits laughed, the other half stood up with twitchy hands. One of them, younger, smaller, whispered, Wait, did he say his name was Boone?" The name rippled like a chill wind through warm guts. Jedediah Boone wasn't just a ghost story. He was the reason certain star systems posted bounties on shadows. He was the man who once killed 3 pirates before they hit the floor and shot the 4th's gun hand off before it touched his weapon. But it was too late to back out now. Outside, the dust stirred. Boone stood at the hitching post beside his horse, back to the door, dust coat flapping slow in the wind. One hand brushed the saddle. The other stayed near his hip, fingers hanging relaxed, but coiled, like gravity was waiting for a signal. The door burst open behind him. Cracks came out laughing, gun already in hand. "Too slow, old man." Boone moved. Nobody really saw it. Not clearly. There was a blur of motion, 2 flashes of light, and 2 sounds like thunder had hiccuped. Then Cracks's gun clattered to the dirt. So did his left arm. He howled, dropped to his knees, and stared in disbelief at the blood mist steaming off his stump. Boone turned around slowly, both pistols held low. The barrels smoked like they were tired but still willing. His eyes were calm. Not angry. Not smug. Just quiet, like the world was ending again, and he'd already lived through it once. 3 more bandits ran out the saloon, weapons raised. Boone didn't move from where he stood. He fired once, then twice. A plasma rifle exploded in one of their hands. The second took a bullet through his leg armor, which shattered like glass. The third stopped, dropped his gun, and raised both hands. Boone holstered his pistols. No spinning. No show. Just function. Fast in, fast out. He looked at the third bandit, who trembled like the wind might tip him over. "Pick him up," Boone said, gesturing at Cracks. "And walk away. Tell whoever sent you the next one doesn't walk away." The bandits scrambled, dragging Cracks as he bled and swore and howled toward the hovering skiff they'd parked outside town. One of them looked back, just once. Boone met his eyes. The bandit looked away and didn't stop running until the ship lifted off and vanished behind the mesa ridge. Inside the saloon, the tension cracked like old wood. Someone finally said, That was Jedediah Boone." Someone else said, "Thought he was dead." The bartender just shook his head and stood up slow, wiping a glass with hands that still trembled. Boone walked back inside, dust trailing behind him like smoke from a forgotten fire. He didn't say a word. Just walked to the bar, picked up his drink, and drained it in one go. He nodded once at the bartender. "You all right?" the bartender asked. Boone nodded. "Hat's fine." And with that, he stepped out again, vanishing into the red-orange afternoon like the whole thing had just been an interruption. But the rumors were already flying. The message already sent. The name already resurrected. Jedediah Boone was back. And someone was going to regret waking him up. Dawn cracked open with a red sky and a slow breeze that smelled like metal and dry grass. Boone was already awake, standing outside the cave with his duster flapping against his legs and his gaze locked on the horizon. Rilo stirred behind him, blinking against the rising light, one hand still resting on the pistol he'd been given the night before. The fire had burned low. The boy stretched, sore from sleeping on rock and nerves, but said nothing as he joined Boone outside. The older man didn't speak either. He just watched the dust rise far off in the distance where the first trade roads met the rim. Someone was coming. Not fast, not reckless. Measured. Confident. That made Boone's jaw tighten ever so slightly. They saddled up in silence, Boone on his old gray, Rilo on a spare bay with one lazy eye and a saddle that creaked in protest. They rode down the slope and across the dried-up creek bed, taking the long way toward the plateau where signals still bounced clean enough to pick up chatter from passing ships. The air was cooler up here, and the rocks sharper, shaped by years of wind and stories. Rilo rode behind Boone, clutching the reins like they were about to run off without him, every so often stealing glances at the older man's back, as if trying to study what made him different from the rest. After an hour, Boone finally spoke. He pointed to a small outpost built into the side of a mesa, half rock and half steel, buzzing faintly with old solar panels and long-range antennae. It looked abandoned but alive in the way certain things wait rather than sleep. Boone guided his horse toward the door and dismounted with the quiet precision of a man who always expected trouble but didn't waste time looking for it. Rilo followed, gun belt hanging awkward on his hips, eyes wide. Inside, the place smelled like rust and sweat. An old trader named Marin ran the station, a wiry man with 4 prosthetic limbs and a sharp tongue. He didn't greet them, didn't smile. Just stared at Boone like someone trying to remember a name from a grave. Then he spoke. "You're dead." Boone didn't answer. "You were dead," Marin repeated, adjusting the small lenses on his left eye. He pointed at Rilo. "This one got a death wish too." "We're just passing through," Boone said. "That right?" Marin leaned over a console and tapped a few keys. "You lit up every bounty board from here to the belt. Someone put a collector's price on your head. 2 million alive. 1 million dead. If I were younger and dumber." "You'd still miss," Boone said calmly. Marin snorted. "You still got that edge. What do you want?" "Names. The man who wants my guns. I figure someone that loud leaves footprints." Marin tapped a few more commands. The screen lit up with a slow-loading image of a silver-skinned figure with no eyes and robes that shimmered like mercury. Rilo flinched at the sight. Boone just stared. The name blinked in glowing letters. Vordzen. Collector of myths. Purchaser of legends. Known to build private museums of dead heroes and take their weapons as trophies. Boone studied the photo. He buys ghosts. Now he wants me. He wants your pistols, Marin corrected. And the story that comes with them. He can't afford the ending, Boone said. Rilo stepped forward. Why now? Why come for him after all this time? Because he's running out of legends, Marin said. Most of the old names are dead. You kill enough history, eventually you go looking for the ones that vanished instead. Makes your collection look full again. Boone nodded. Where is he? Marin hesitated. He ain't easy to find. Moves his ship between moons. Doesn't send messages. Just bounties. Then I'll send one back, Boone said. He turned to leave. Marin called after him. You planning to walk into his fleet with that kid and your antique guns? No, Boone said without turning. I'm planning to make him come to me. They rode back down the mesa into the afternoon heat. Boone stopped near a tall cliff with a flat rock face. He dismounted and unpacked a small transmitter, setting it on the ground and adjusting the settings like he'd done it 100 times before. Rilo watched in silence as Boone removed his hat, cleaned the brim with care, and set it on a post. Then he recorded a message. To Vordzen. You want my pistols. You want my name. Then come take them. But bring a shovel. You'll need it. He ended the message and uploaded it to the public grid. Within minutes, the signal bounced across every channel from here to the nearest relay tower. You think that'll reach him? Rilo asked. No. Boone looked at the sky. But the men he sends will. That evening, they camped in the shadow of the cliffs. Boone showed Rilo how to set traps with tripwires and rocks, how to listen for engines under the wind, how to spot the gleam of scopes at distance. Rilo tried to absorb it all, hands shaking slightly every time Boone handed him a piece of gear. You ever kill a man? Rilo asked quietly. Boone didn't answer right away. Then he said, too many? And not enough of the right ones. They sat in silence as the stars bled into the sky. The moons began to rise. Somewhere far off, a skiff engine whispered over the hills, but didn't approach. Rilo looked up at Boone. You think he'll come himself? Eventually. The real collectors always do. They want to see what they're buying. And if he brings an army? Then they'll find out what I've still got left. The wind picked up, scattering ash from the fire. Boone stared into the flames again, same as he had in the cave. His face was calm, but the line of his jaw was set hard. Rilo lay back against the rocks and pulled his coat tighter, pistol at his side. He didn't know if he'd make it through the next day. But something about the way Boone sat there, quiet and ready, made the fear feel smaller than it should have. High above them, a drone passed between clouds, blinking silently as it streamed the location back to a fleet that was already turning toward the planet. The collector had seen the message. And this time, he was coming himself.
The suns had dipped lower in the sky by the time Boone reached the edge of town, casting long amber streaks across the dirt road behind him. His horse moved slow and easy, like it had learned long ago to match the man's pace. Boone wasn't in a hurry. He rarely was. That was the trick of it. Most men got themselves killed rushing toward something. Boone waited until it came to him. The wind kicked dust over his boots, brushing past like it had stories to tell. He didn't listen. Not yet. Behind him, the saloon was already buzzing, the kind of buzz that spread across settlements faster than star transmissions. News like that didn't stay put. Someone had filmed it. Someone always did. By now, his face was probably bouncing between moons and markets, between warlords and outlaws, all asking the same thing. Was that really Boone? Was he alive? And more importantly, why now? He rode into the gulch beyond town, where the cliffs rose like broken teeth and shadows clung to the rocks like secrets. There was a cave up there. Not much of a home, but it had kept him out of trouble. Or maybe it had just kept trouble waiting. Either way, he dismounted slowly, brushed the dust off his coat, and walked the rest of the way in silence. The cave had a fire pit, some rations, and a single bedroll beside a pack that hadn't been touched in months. He crouched near the stones, struck a match, and lit the kindling with practiced ease. The fire crackled. Boone stared into it like a man waiting for ghosts to introduce themselves. They didn't take long. He reached into his pack and pulled out an old, creased piece of fabric, a badge. Worn, scratched, and long since stripped of any real power. The badge of a peacekeeper. Galactic Enforcement Division. His name still faint on the back. He hadn't worn it in years, not since Trappist, too. Not since Jackson died. Jackson had been his partner. The kind of man who laughed too loud and shot too straight. They'd cleaned out 3 systems together, shut down a slaver network on the moons of Eldraxis, even stood side by side during the siege of the Helix Vaults. Boone remembered the way Jackson had stood with one foot on a crate, chewing something bitter, pistol balanced on his knee like it was part of his body. Said he was going to retire one day. Start a vineyard. Said the only thing he hated more than bandits was bad wine. That dream ended in a hangar bay with 3 bullets in Jackson's chest. Friendly fire, they'd called it. A glitch in the comms. But Boone had known better. Jackson had uncovered a weapons deal between corrupt marshals and off-world raiders. He'd gone to command with proof. The next morning, he was dead and the files were gone. Boone had buried him on a nameless ridge and walked away from the stars for good. Left the badge on his grave, but kept another in his pack, just in case. And now someone had stirred the dust again. Boone held the badge over the fire for a long moment, watching the light flicker across the metal. He didn't burn it. Couldn't. Instead, he set it down gently beside him and leaned back against the stone wall. His pistols lay beside him, still warm from the draw. He cleaned them slowly, methodically, wiping away the burn marks with a cloth that had seen more battle than peace. He checked every chamber, every spring, the way a man checks a heartbeat. These guns weren't just tools. They were memory, legacy, echo. He heard a sound outside, a soft shuffle of boots against gravel. He didn't look up, just kept cleaning. After a moment, a figure appeared at the cave entrance, small and nervous. The boy from the saloon. The one who hadn't run. Boone didn't speak. He waited. The boy stepped inside, hands raised halfway. 17, maybe 18. Fangs too small to be dangerous. Fear in his eyes like a flickering candle. I didn't mean no harm, the boy said. I know, Boone answered. They left me behind. I didn't want to go with them. You did. Not really. I thought they were something. Crack said he knew you. Said you were just a myth. Just an old man with dusty guns. Boone didn't reply. The boy hesitated. You really, Boone? The Boone. That's what they say. My uncle used to tell stories about you. Said you saved a whole colony with 1 bullet. That one's not true. Took 2. The boy almost smiled, then remembered where he was. He fidgeted. I didn't shoot at you. I didn't even draw. I noticed. Boone set the pistol down and looked at him for the first time. You got a name? Rilo. Rilo Thatch. Where you from, Rilo? Lunaris 9. Or what's left of it. Boone nodded slowly. Lunaris 9 had been raided 2 years back. Slave ships. Whole families gone. He remembered the reports. Quiet settlements made for loud targets. They took my sister, Rilo said. I came out here trying to find leads. Ended up running with Crax's crew. Figured they knew people. They didn't. Just knew how to hurt folks. Boone leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Why'd you come find me? Because when you shot Crax, I saw it. You didn't even blink. You didn't kill him unless you had to. You could have dropped all of them. I did. No, Rilo said. You let them live. Except the one who shot first. Boone didn't answer right away. The fire snapped between them. Finally, he said, killing's easy. Living with it's not. Rilo looked down. They're gonna send more, aren't they? Someone will. Why? Because I didn't stay buried. And now someone remembers. Rilo sat down near the fire, hesitant. I want to help. No, you don't. I do. I can shoot. Boone raised an eyebrow. You ever shot at something that shot back? No. But I will. Boone picked up the second pistol, checked the chamber, and handed it to the boy grip first. Rilo stared at it like it was alive. If you're going to walk this road, you'd better understand something, Boone said. There ain't no glory at the end of it. Just wait. And names you'll never forget. Rilo nodded slowly, wrapping his fingers around the handle. It fit his hand like it wasn't quite sure it belonged there. Boone looked back at the fire. Get some sleep. We ride at first light. Where? To find the man who wants my guns. And make sure he never asks again. The storm came before sunrise, but it wasn't made of water. It came with heat trails and engine screams that cut across the sky like claws. Boone woke up moments before the sound reached them. He didn't sit up fast, didn't shout, didn't panic. He opened his eyes, rolled to one knee, and scanned the horizon. Rilo, still half asleep, blinked at the sky and asked if it was thunder. Boone didn't answer. He was already strapping on his pistols. The sound thickened, deeper now, unmistakable. Not one ship. Not two. 3 dropships moving in tight formation, their hulls marked with the same shimmering silver paint as the figure they'd seen on the console. The collector wasn't sending thugs anymore. He was sending professionals. Boone moved with a practiced rhythm, checking the saddlebags, grabbing the repeater rifle from under his bedroll, tossing it to Rilo without ceremony. The boy caught it clumsily, but didn't drop it. His fingers curled around it like he knew this would be the day the story got real. Boone grabbed a handful of charges and tucked them into his coat, then walked to the edge of the cliff and looked down. Dust clouds spiraled as the dropship slowed into a landing pattern. He counted 7 figures disembarking. Each one was armored head to toe, sleek and modern, no wasted motion in their step. They moved like men used to ending things fast. They weren't here to capture. They were here to clean up. Rilo stood beside Boone, eyes wide. That's a lot of them. Boone's voice was dry. Too many for a fair fight. Just enough for a message. What if they have snipers? They don't. I'd have heard the relay clicks already. You think we can win? We're not here to win. We're here to be remembered. He moved down a narrow trail that led behind the rocks toward a ridge overlooking the valley. Rilo followed, breath shallow, every sound magnified in his chest. The ridge gave them enough elevation to see the whole landing zone, and from there, Boone began his work. He planted 2 of the old seismic grenades beneath the path, angled them so they'd blow outward instead of up. Then he pulled out a small case and opened it to reveal a dusty old scope. He attached it to the long pistol he rarely used. It was older than most tech on this planet, but Boone had tuned it himself years ago. It didn't miss. The mercenaries moved fast. They spread into 2 squads, one heading straight toward the transmitter site, the other angling for the ridge. Boone nodded. They were smart, but they weren't him. He let them get closer, waited until one of them stepped into the marker zone he'd carved with boot scuffs earlier. Then he fired once. The shot rang out across the canyon. One man went down without a sound, helmet splitting like fruit. The others dove for cover. Then the grenades triggered. The explosion lifted 2 of them into the air, limbs flailing, before dropping them in a heap of metal and dust. They'll call for backup, Rilo said, voice shaking. Let them. More bodies make a better story. The second squad fired back blindly, their shots cracking into the rocks above Boone's position. One pulse round struck close, sending a shower of stone chips across Boone's shoulder. He didn't move. He adjusted his aim, breathed in once, and fired again. Another target dropped. This one screamed. The kind of scream that made you grateful you couldn't see the wound. Below, the dropships powered up again, their engines rotating slightly. Boone realized what they were doing. They weren't retreating. They were shifting for a better firing angle. Someone inside those ships had started to take him seriously. Time to move, Boone said. He led Rilo down the back side of the ridge, cutting across narrow paths he'd mapped years ago. The rocks were sharp here, the footing loose, but it gave them angles the attackers wouldn't expect. As they moved, Boone pulled a small device from his belt and triggered it. The secondary transmitter activated on the far side of the canyon, and for a moment, the enemy fire redirected. A decoy, simple and old-fashioned, but effective. They circled until they had eyes on the ship's command ramp. That's where Boone saw him. Vor Zen. The collector stepped down from the ship in silence, flanked by two heavy guards with dual-linked pulse cannons. His robes shimmered even in the dim light. He didn't speak. He just looked toward the ridge Boone had abandoned and smiled. "He's here himself," Rilo whispered. "That's the mistake," Boone replied. He lifted both pistols. The guards noticed too late. Boone fired twice, 2 clean shots. One guard fell with a hole through his visor. The other stumbled, fired wildly, then dropped with a second shot to the throat plate. Vor Zen didn't move. He looked up toward the rocks where Boone stood, lifted his hand, and activated a field drone. It sparked into life, midair, and launched toward Boone like a silver wasp. Boone ducked, grabbed Rilo's shoulder, and pulled him behind cover as the drone fired 3 sharp bursts. The second clipped Boone's coat, burned a hole through the leather, but missed skin. "We need to disable that drone," Boone said. Rilo raised the rifle Boone had given him, took a shaky breath, and squeezed the trigger. The shot hit wide. The drone adjusted and started toward him. Left side of the emitter, Boone snapped. "Look for the flicker." Rilo adjusted. Fired again. This time the drone spun midair and dropped like a rock, crashing into the dirt with a metallic crunch. Rilo stared in disbelief. Boone nodded once. "Good. Now take the long path and circle to the right. I'll draw the attention. But what about? Go. If he gets away, he brings a fleet next time." Rilo swallowed hard, then ran low along the canyon wall. Boone stood up from cover and walked toward the center of the landing zone. He didn't sprint. He didn't hide. He walked. Gunfire sparked around him, mercenaries still alive and still trying, but too shaken now to aim true. Boone moved through the fire like it didn't belong to him, returning shots only when needed, each one clean, each one final. By the time he reached the edge of the landing ramp, 5 more were down. Vor Zen stared at him. No fear, just fascination. "You are exactly as I hoped," the collector said. "You're late," Boone replied. The collector raised his hand, fingers glowing with charge. Some alien tech embedded beneath the skin. Boone didn't flinch. He fired both pistols at once. One shot struck the device in the collector's arm. The other hit his leg. Vor collapsed with a shocked grunt, sparks flying from his wrist as the tech shorted. Boone walked up slowly. He didn't shoot again. He leaned close. "You want the legend?" he asked. "This is what it costs." Behind him, Rilo emerged, rifle at his shoulder. The collector looked from Boone to the boy, pain and disbelief in his face. Boone took the collector's wrist chip and threw it into the canyon. Then he holstered his pistols and turned away. Let's leave him with the story. One where he survived. One where the man he wanted to collect handed him back his life and said, "Not today." They walked away together as the suns rose, casting their shadows long and sharp across the blood-soaked dust. The sky looked different by the time they reached the edge of the valley. The dust had settled, but not the silence. Rilo walked beside Boone, slower now, the rifle hanging across his back, boots kicking through ash and grit that still smoked faintly from earlier blasts. Behind them, the collector's ship sat quiet and half-burned, engines cold. Ramp still down like it expected a retreat that never came. Vor Zen hadn't followed. He hadn't moved. Boone had made sure he would live just long enough to think about every decision that had brought him here. The message wasn't in killing him. The message was in letting him crawl back to whatever icy palace he called a home, without his guards, without his pride, and without the certainty that any man could be owned. Boone walked straight, head tilted slightly to the side, always listening. Even now, when the shooting had stopped and the dead had been counted, he didn't relax. He'd learned long ago that danger liked to whisper, not shout. Rilo hadn't said a word since they'd left the ship. His face was stiff with something that wasn't fear, but wasn't confidence either. somewhere between awe and wait. Boone knew that feeling. The first time you take a life and realize the story doesn't end there. It keeps walking with you. Every step, every breath. Boone didn't speak, didn't offer comfort. Some things had to settle in a man's bones on their own. They made camp near a dried-out streambed under a jagged overhang. Boone set the fire, small and tight, enough for heat and not much more. Rilo sat across from him, elbows on his knees, staring into the flames like they were going to tell him what to do next. Boone poured a small measure of clean water into a tin cup and handed it over without a word. The boy took it, drank, then finally looked up. "So what now?" Boone took a long moment before answering. "That depends." "On what?" "On how far the story's going to travel. That collector doesn't just give up. He'll spin it however he can. Say we ambushed him. Say we used tech he didn't see. Make himself the victim so he can try again with more force next time. We could go public," Rilo said. "Tell people what happened. Show them he's not untouchable." Boone shook his head. "No one cares unless there's blood in the water. And even then, they only listen until someone else screams louder. Then what was the point? The point was to remind him he bleeds. And to remind everyone watching that some men still don't sell." Rilo nodded slowly, staring back into the fire. His hands fidgeted near the hem of his coat. He still looked young, but less so now. His shoulders carried something they hadn't the day before. Boone saw it happen, the way it always did. One day the world was made of walls. The next you saw behind them and realized most of it was built on bones and secrets. "You ever thought about stopping?" Rilo asked. "I did," Boone said. "Thought I had. And now I remember why I shouldn't have." They sat in silence for a long time, fire snapping, wind curling through the rocks like an old ghost searching for a name. Somewhere in the distance, a night bird called out, strange and sharp, something between a whistle and a warning. Rilo looked up, then down again. "You think he'll send more?" "He won't send. He'll come himself next time. But not until he's patched up and found new armor to hide behind. Might be a week, might be a year, but he'll be back. Men like him always want to settle the score. So what do we do?" Boone leaned back against the stone and stared up at the stars. "For now, we keep moving. Stay ahead of the story until it catches up in the right place. And when it does, we make sure the ending's worth remembering." The stars shimmered overhead, too many to count, too far to matter, and yet each one a witness to whatever was coming next. Boone closed his eyes just for a moment and let the quiet settle around him like dust. The boy was right to ask, what now? There was no map for it, no next chapter already written, just men like them and the paths they carved through the dirt. The next morning, they broke camp before the sun rose. Rilo moved faster now, more precise. He packed without being told, mounted without needing guidance, and kept his eyes on the horizon. Boone watched him without speaking. The boy was changing. That was the thing about fire and pressure. It didn't just burn. It shaped. They rode east, through the canyon pass that marked the edge of known territory, past the warning signs and beyond the reach of mapped trade routes. Boone preferred it that way. The further from the rules, the closer to the truth. By midday, they reached an outpost town called Scrapper's Hollow, little more than a few metal sheds, a fuel tower, and a broken water mill that hadn't worked since before either of them was born. The people there didn't ask questions. They looked at Boone and looked away. That was respect, or fear. Sometimes it was hard to tell the difference. Boone tied off his horse, walked into the comm shack, and sent out a message. A short one. 2 words. Delivered. When he stepped outside again, Rilo was waiting. What did you tell them? That he lived. Why? Because the fear is better than the death. Let them wonder how close it came. Let them think twice next time they see a man in a dust coat and a wide hat. You think they will? Boone looked down the long, empty road that stretched out of the hollow and into nothing. They will. That night, they didn't make camp. They kept riding, the stars blinking over their shoulders and the horizon swallowing the trail ahead. Rilo said nothing for a long time. Then he asked the question that had been sitting on his chest since the canyon. Why didn't you kill him? Boone didn't answer right away. He let the silence stretch. Then he said, because death ends the story. Fear writes sequels. They kept writing. The dust rose behind them like smoke from a slow-moving fire. And somewhere out in the black beyond the moons, Vordzen sat in the corner of his ruined ship, eyes wide, hand shaking, the echo of twin gunshots still dancing through his ears. He had his life. He had his story. But now he understood something he hadn't before. You don't collect men like Boone. You survive them. If you're lucky.